Hello everyone, this is Trackpad Artist, returning to you all with another weekly installment of my mediocre artistry and decent world building. This is to say that in celebration of the spookiest day of the year, the attention of this week's video will be pulled away from my main ongoing world building project of Ryng. Instead, we'll be focusing our attention onto another project I am becoming involved in, editing and voice acting for a fan rewrite of the popular Amazon show Hazbin Hotel. To this end, the project's director and writer, AJtheWildWolf, a previous collaborator of the channel, asked me to write and design a character for the project's world, something that, admittedly, I had been rather excited to do for quite a while, incorporating the rules and laws of her world to create a character that can truly fit within the space. Though not a collaboration in the traditional sense, AJ also wanted to write and design her own original character for the world of Ryng, a video that should be going live on her channel tomorrow, for all those interested. With all that sorted, let's get into the matter at hand, looking a little into the world of this rewrite before exploring my written character, a nameless sinner of hell, John Doe. For those who have seen my previous video on this channel, on how to write characters, you'll know that I never begin a character's design with their visuals, but rather their writing. This process involves not only the character themselves, but the environment they find themselves in, which luckily for us, has already been established by our good friend AJ. Though the setting has been established, this doesn't mean that there is no work to be done in this realm of writing, but rather that instead of creating a setting, we'll need to learn more about it. This rewrite of Hazbin Hotel, the bed and breakfast for Former Baddies, takes place in a hell quite different from the Amazon show, with differing rules and laws surrounding the formation of sinners and demons. Because of this, it is incredibly important to conform to these written rules and laws when designing our character, as I find the greatest levels of enjoyment in remaining as faithful to a world as possible. To ensure our character can be as accurate as possible, I interrogated AJ for some juicy lore surrounding these laws, forming a comprehensive collection of rules for our character's story and design to follow. The bodies of sinners, people who have died and wound up in hell, are personally designed by Satan, King of Hell, with the intent to ridicule and torment their inhabitants by manifesting their insecurities or serving as reminders to the wickedness of their past lives. To this end, a sinner's body can take any shape, so long as it isn't perfectly human. Aside from this, the only strict rules surrounding a sinner's body are manifested in the colors that they are wrapped in, with each color corresponding to our particular cause of a soul's stay in hell. Each of these colors correspond to one of the 7 deadly sins, with more specific sins having their own nicher colors and hues associated with them. The mark of pride is red, strong and imposing in its presence. The stains of wrath are orange, embers of a roaring flame of violent emotion. The sign of gluttony is yellow, the bountiful harvest of excess. The blemish of greed is green, the scales of the manipulative serpent. The scar of sloth is blue, a lull of life and prosperity. The silks of envy are purple, the robes of the wandering eyes of nobility. The passion of lust is pink, the inviting allure of things unattainable. In addition to these 7, more specific sins include brown for heresy, black for hatred, maroon for violence, cyan for fraud, and white for treachery. Aside from these limitations on color, a sinner's body can take any shape the devil sees fit, with their purpose and irony often changing on the devil's whims and sense of design. With these rules established, we can swiftly move on to this character's narrative purpose, which in this case is incredibly easy to establish. This character is purely for fun. I was asked to make it and decided to do it. They aren't set to be featured in any one of my or others' stories, and thus can simply exist on their own merit. However, in order to create an engaging character, there are still elements of a narrative that we should come to establish, namely their driving force. As a sinner of hell, this can present us with a slew of interesting questions to serve as a foundation to this drive and desire. Are they content being in hell? Do they feel as though they deserve to be there? Or do they desire something more? Do they feel wronged? To answer these questions, let's explore the life of this character, and find out what exactly got them sent to hell in the first place. John Doe, the alias given to unidentified cadavers during criminal investigations, has since been the name placed onto one George Clint, a serial identity thief and financial scammer throughout the mid-1900s. Beginning his sinful practices as a young man during the rise of America's Great Depression, George originally turned to such practices out of necessity, the young family he had started unable to be sustained by the pitiful salary he was attaining. Though he had never delved into such practices in the past, George found relative success in swindling the less fortunate, impersonating government and bank workers with the promise of financial aid. However, the decade of economic depression soon came and went, but by that point George had developed somewhat of a knack for his unorthodox talents, coming to push survival away from his goal and replacing it with the pursuit of luxury. George turned his eyes to banks and corporations, all the while continuing to swindle the poor and needy as a means to fund his more lucrative operations. Though supportive at first, understanding the desperation brought about by the Depression, George's family soon understood that this new habit was a destructive one, urging George to pull himself away from his sins, a warning he would not come to heed. Months passed, and soon George would be left alone, abandoned by his wife and children. Yet undeterred, even in the face of such destructive abandonment, George drove deeper and deeper into his scams, growing to amass hundreds of thousands of dollars over his career. Such amassed wealth, however, would not go unnoticed. As though he had a silver tongue, George proved to be less than savvy in the discreet handling of his money, eventually coming to bring about his arrest. Sentenced to 40 years for the incredible financial damages brought about by his hand, George, even while incarcerated, couldn't help but scratch the addictive itch he had developed, cheating and swindling inmate and officer alike, all until his actions would come to catch up with him. He would be found dead in his cell, bones broken, body bloodied, flesh bruised, killed by those he thought he could swindle. This is the life of our character, one George Clint turned John Doe, a serial scammer who fell consequence to his serial manipulation. So how does John feel about all this whole hell business? Well, taking into account the nature behind a sinner's body, which by proxy includes their mind, I decided to have a little fun with the ironies of John's situation. Being a serial impersonator and identity thief, I figured the most fitting consequence to the character would be the stripping of his own self, reduced to a nameless, faceless man with no memories of his past self, but still a vague hope in remembering such things. From this springs John's desires and motivations, a longing for understanding his true past self. So how does this desire play into John's hellbound story? Let's finish exploring his narrative to find out. Now, bound to hell, stripped of his identity in a cruel irony, George became John Doe, a nameless body, one of millions, but one with an insatiable desire to impersonate. Though losing his memory, his silver tongue remained just as charming and just as dangerous, a tool he would use to not only survive his hellish situation, but to drive a twisted pleasure from. One evening, while scrounging about the city streets of hell, John came upon a child, scared and alone, terrified. John extended a hand, his warm voice beckoning the child to take it. The child grabbed hold and sealed their fate. Lanky claws tore at the small sinner's tender face, as John tore flesh from bone, stabbing, cutting, carving. John held the skull of his first hellbound victim in his palm, hacking away at the parts he found unsavory, preserving nothing but the bones beneath the face. A mask, a new self, a new identity. Since his first victim, John has refined his craft, his masks growing much more elegant and refined, while the souls he's amassed have granted him a gift. The ability to shatter and bend his porcelain form to reveal a demonic visage, but one with the power over the mind, the ability to be perceived as a friend by all those who look a little too long into his hollow eyes. But such a power comes at a cost, not one of insanity, but clarity, as in maintaining such a form, John gains glimpses into his past, a painful reminder of his true self, but one that, along with his heightened form, fades within the hour. Now John's only desire is to be himself, a goal that he can only achieve through the collection of more souls, more identities. But with such vast collections, does John truly remember which identity is his? With the narrative established, we can now look into the many aspects of his visual design, a collection of porcelain and flesh, sculpted and molded into the visage of a broken mannequin. This body reflects the two greatest consequences of John's eternity, that being his mortal death and the stripping of his identity. His body, even in hell, remains crooked, shattered, misshapen, and what body he does have is a blank slate, void of self-expression and personality. He is nameless and faceless, an ultimate consequential irony of his sins, one he will take with him to the ends of eternity. This consequence, however, also conforms to hell's laws of color, the porcelain of his body being an incredibly desaturated cyan, mirroring the fraudulent practices that dragged him to hell. This, altogether, comes to form my original character for the world of the bed and breakfast, a serial scammer given his just desserts, a man with no memory, bent on reclaiming what little of it remains hidden within the recesses of his mind. All that said, I do believe we have reached the end of today's discussion. As always, thank you all for sticking around to the end of the video to support me and my work. If you enjoyed this discussion, feel free to leave a like on the video, and check out AJ's channel for more news on the bed and breakfast. Additionally, feel free to leave any suggestions for future topics we should discuss in the comments down below. And if you'd like to go a step further in your support of me and Ryng's development, my TTRPG, as well as more videos like this one, consider becoming a Patreon or channel member, to not only support me, but gain access to additional benefits. With either membership, you can gain access to my videos early and ad-free. You can engage with me in an exclusive supporter chat within our Discord, as well as gain access to Q&As with yours truly. All this alongside a slew of other additional perks. The link to my Patreon, AJ's channel, as well as our Discord server will be in the description. Until next time, this has been Trackpad Artist. Thank you all for watching, and I hope to see you again soon for our next discussion. Happy Halloween!